Okay, today what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going over the midterm study guide. So you're going to have your exam in just a little bit, but I'm going to go over the questions, I'm going to go over the answers. If you look at your old study guides, most of these questions are on there in some form or fashion. The only exception would be like error 4 questions, okay? So the first question is naming the two accomplishments of the Articles of Confederation. And really, it's these land ordinances that is going to be its accomplishments. Remember, the Articles is a pretty weak government document. It doesn't really work for us, so we'll eventually replace it. But we do have the Land Ordinance of 1785. And the Land Ordinance was just a process to survey the land in the Northwest Territory. Remember, after the American Revolutionary War is fought, the United States gains its independence in the Treaty of Paris, and we gain all this land, the original 13, all the way out here to the Mississippi River. Now, when you gain all this new land, and remember the colonists, now the Americans, are land hungry, they're naturally going to want to start spreading out. This is the state of Virginia at the moment, which will eventually split off into Kentucky. And then when the Civil War comes around, it's going to split up into West Virginia as well. But you have this Northwest Territory, which is really good farmland. And the colonists, now the Americans, want to settle it. So you got to figure out how you're going to survey it. You know, what's something that you can farm and what's something that maybe you could do something else with, a way to process the land and to slice it up. So that's the Land Ordinance. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is a way to admit, once these people come out here, admit these new territories into as states. So eventually you're going to get the Ohio Territory, and they're going to apply for statehood. And when Ohio comes into the United States, they're going to be the same as these prestigious 13 original colonies. So all new states to the United States are equal. And you see that with the American flag, because when you look at the Field of Honor, the star part, all the stars are the same. There's no star that's bigger than any of the others. So any of our new states, and we have 50, they're all the same as the original 13. So the next question you had was, what was the main source of conflict between the American Indians and U.S. citizens during the late 1700s and early 1800s? And how does this kind of affect this Treaty of Greenville? All right, so when you look at the colonists and you look at them later becoming American citizens, the biggest thing that always is the conflict is land. Remember, the colonists are land hungry, and so the concept of land ownership is something foreign to the American Indians. American Indians don't believe you can own the land, no more than you could own the sun, the moon, the stars. They just don't believe in it. But the American citizens are products of the English government. And in England, you have a piece of paper, a land deed, that says you own paper. You know, you own this land. That's your paper says you own land. And so what ends up happening is there's just a miscommunication over land ownership. And every time you are going to expand as a country, and we expand across the continental 48, and we do that in this course, you have Americans running into the American Indians, and they're going to have conflicts over who has the land and who doesn't have the land. So the Americans believe you could own it, the American Indians don't, and the American Indians in the Treaty of Greenville are going to be forced to give up the Ohio River Valley area, so they no longer have this. So Greenville, green land, it's going to be farmland. As time goes on, we're going to get the rest of this, but you can see right now you have different countries over here who pretty much own some of these areas, but this is as of like 1802, this map, okay? So number 3 is, how did Britain's defeat of the Spanish Armada influence Britain's exploration and colonization? So remember, we talked about how Britain was really the weak kind of kid in Europe, and Spain was the big bad, kid. They were the bully. So some conflict between the king and queen, and eventually Spain sends this huge armada. It's a big amount of boats, and so they just go ahead, they send their navy, and what ends up happening is they're destroyed. When Britain defeats the mighty Spanish navy, they become now the number one bully, are the #1 country in Europe. You're not going to want to mess with Britain. Okay? Spain has to retreat back to their shorelines, and now they're not going to mess anymore with the British because you were beaten by them. So now the British are going to be able to settle here along the northeast coastline and the southeast coastline of the North American continent. You're going to have France and Spain here as well. So you got France here in blue, and you definitely have Spain pretty much in Central and South America. But what you're really going to see is Britain kind of coming into their own because now they don't have to compete with Spain, at least here in this part. So number 4 is, what was the Protestant Reformation and how did it contribute to exploration? So remember, you got Martin Luther over there, and he has some issues with the Catholic Church, and he leads pretty much a Protestant Reformation. Doesn't intend to, but hey, it happens. And remember, when you look at the root word of this Protestant, protest. So they're protesting the Catholic Church. Now, as they protest the Catholic Church, we get this new religion. And back then, your king is the head of your religion. You know, he's the one who says we're Catholic or we're Protestant. And so there's going to be some conflicts between these new Protestants and their king. Sometimes, you know, you'll be in a country, it's Protestant, but you're a Catholic, you leave it. Sometimes you're in a Catholic country and you're a Protestant, you leave it. When these people leave their country, a lot of them come here to the New World. There's no established religion over here. There's really nothing established over here. Over here, it is complete freedom. So the Protestants were a new Christian religious group founded in Europe. The Catholic Church did not like them. There's constant bloody fights between the Catholics and the Protestants. So a lot of Protestants are going to leave Europe for the Americas to find a new place where they can practice their religion freely. So think about the Puritans and think about the Pilgrims. They're a classic example of religious dissenters. They're dissenting. They're breaking away from their church. They're actually Protestants. They break away. And they come over here and they are settling a colony for their religious belief. So number 5 is, what European nation took the lead in discovering a water route to India? Remember, all the way back there in Era 1 is Portugal. Portugal really starts off the age of exploration for us in this course. So this little bitty like island, and it's right, well, it's not really an island, this little bitty country right next to Portugal. This little place is really going to kind of kick it off. So Portugal is all this stuff in kind of this like salmon color. So this is where they're going to be. Remember, they skirt the coastline of Africa. They don't want to get too far out here in the ocean yet, but they are getting pretty far out, and they do get to India eventually. They do get Brazil, so they'll be over here in the New World as well. So question 6 is, what European nation took the lead in settlement of North and South America? Spain. Remember, that little bitty place right here, Portugal, this green one is Spain. And so when Spain notices that their neighbor is bringing in all these riches coming in from Africa and India, they too want to get in on that. I mean, why not? You know, it's keeping up with the Joneses, so they want to keep up with Portugal. Also, you know, Spain's got Isabella and Ferdinand. There's some religious reasons why they want to do it. So, you know, not just always about gold, but there's religious concern as well. But you can see where Spain pretty much settles. And if you think about where people speak Spanish today, that's a direct product of Spain settling and taking kind of this lead in European exploration. All right, so question 7 is the first permanent French settlement in North America. The first permanent French settlement is in Canada at Quebec. And the first permanent English one is in Jamestown, Virginia. So when you look at, you know, Canada, it's up here, okay? But if you look at Jamestown, it's out here on the water. And remember, when they settle it, they believe that this is going to be really great. They can see out here at the ocean to see if, like, Spain's going to come and beat them up, you know, if Spain's going to take stuff. They feel that there is a fresh water resource. There isn't. They just feel like this is a really good spot, you know, that there's going to be gold somewhere, that they'll be able to always defend the fort, but it's really kind of a death trap, and as time goes on, we'll get John Smith, who will save the colony, with his "if you don't work, you don't eat." So the next question was asking you about the colonies and like the colonies, the geography, and the economic activities. So northern economies, or the northern colonies, could also be called New England. So when you look at the New England colonies, remember I kind of told you magic is really cool, not horrible. It's kind of a little mnemonic to help you remember the actual colony names. So you have Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. When you look at those places, the New England colonies, they're right there on the ocean line. So that's where they're going to make their money. And because they're right there on the coastline, they're pretty rocky soil. Their soil's not great. It's not for farming. Their weather is really bad in the winter. They do have pretty cool summers. It's not like here in North Carolina where, it's 110 and you're like, wow, it's really cool today. So it's a little bit different. And so when you look at what they go to make money with, it's fishing, manufacturing, and shipbuilding. A lot of stuff that they can either do out there on the water or things they can do inside, like manufacturing factories. In the southern colonies, kind of remember, my very naughty child should cry grandma. So you're looking at Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And when you think of the southern colonies, the weather is actually pretty good for farming. So great soil, multiple growing seasons. Even when you do reap one of your crops, you've got another one that can come in. So they're going to be the major plantation area. So a lot of planting going on for their economic activity: rice, tobacco, cotton, and indigo. And this cash crops. Cotton is not a cash crop until later, but they are growing it at this time. It's just not one that they make a lot of money off. They make a lot of money off tobacco. Middle colonies, they're kind of like the New England, and they're kind of like the southern colonies. They're kind of stuck in the middle, and they're the middle colonies. So when you look at them, they kind of do a little bit like the southern, and they're a little bit like New England. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, New York. And if you remember, penguins never jump down near you. That's a mnemonic device that should help you out with remembering them. They have good soil and good climate. It's not great like the southern one, but they have good enough where they can make things with their soil. They can grow things with it. And so what they become is kind of the grains. So they have bread baskets. That's what they get named for. So a lot of grains, that's what they're going to grow. They do fishing just like New England, and they also do some shipbuilding just like New England. There are a lot of trade that goes on in the middle colonies because you've got the New England colonies needing to get stuff to the southern. You've got the southern needing to get stuff to the New England. And so the middle colonies act as the middleman. So you've got a lot of trade here, particularly like New York. That's a major port area. So New York Harbor, New York City is a major port, a major harbor at this time, and will continue for a very long time in our history. So the next question, 9, is Pilgrims where and why, and Puritans where and why, and Quakers where and why. So the Pilgrims are going to be in Plymouth Colony, and remember the Pilgrims want religious freedom for their group only. They're a little bit nicer, they'll buy stuff from the American Indians, they'll buy land. They're the ones who sit down and have a Thanksgiving with the American Indians. The Puritans are going to be Massachusetts Bay Colony, and they're a religious freedom group as well. So they come over here because they're trying to purify the Church of England, not real happy with it, and so they come over here and they just want religious freedom for their group. They're a little bit different because they're Puritans. They believe they're pure, so they're not going to be as nice to the American Indians because they don't understand them, and they don't want to understand them either. The Quakers, the Brotherhood of Man, they're going to be in Pennsylvania. Again, the Quakers come for religious freedom for their group. They try and convert people, but it's not where they're going to torture anybody to get them to convert. And so you got William Penn for the Quakers, who's going to settle in the Pennsylvania area. And he's going to actually get this little port area out here so he has a waterway for his colony. So he's a pretty good leader in that.